Welcome to the channel and to this, the final video in our study and final discipline in our study of the Christian spiritual disciplines as outlined by Richard Foster in his book, Celebration of Discipline. And we finished the study of disciplines on the discipline of celebration. You might be thinking, how is that a discipline? There's nothing hard about celebration. It doesn't require effort or focus, and it isn't really even connected only with the spiritual life. Well, Foster would offer that celebration is a discipline and one that is very important to our lives as Christians. He connects the idea of celebration to that of joy. Essentially, celebration leads us to being able to embrace life with joy, and out of joy then comes celebration. So throughout this teaching, throughout this video, I will be using celebration and joy equally, working from the position that they are both complementary and indeed require the other to be experienced fully. Celebration and joy is something that marked the life of Jesus. When his birth was announced on that first Christmas, it was on a note of celebration and jubilation. "I bring you good news of great joy," cried the angels. And indeed, throughout Jesus' ministry, he engaged in a great enjoyment of life. He went to parties. He brought happiness and joy to those around him. He lived a life of such celebration and enjoyment that he was even accused of being a drunkard and a glutton. Certainly not flattering accusations, but the joy with which Jesus lived his life was such that those observing him did not even know how to categorize it properly. And when Jesus prepared to leave, he passed this joy on to his followers, saying in John chapter 15, verse 11, "These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full." But back to how this would be a discipline in our lives today. It would be very easy to look at our world today and to struggle to find very much to celebrate, or very much joy at all. We are almost conditioned by the media to look away from joy and to find the problems and sorrow in our lives. Places of work are filled with the stress of having to meet unreasonable expectations and getting caught in the race up the corporate ladder. We work hard in order to make money, and that money is supposed to bring us joy, or at least buy us the opportunity for joy to happen, yet we rarely actually enjoy the fruits of our labor. And those very things that we are working for seem to fall out of reach instead of gain. And instead of gain, there is loss. But if we can turn ourselves back towards celebration, we can regain the lost joy. And we cannot do this on our own strength. We need this to be directed by our focus on God. We need joy that is beyond our own making. Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 10 tells us that the joy of the Lord is our strength. It is this joy, his joy, that gives us the endurance and perseverance to get through difficult times that we would otherwise give up on. As such, celebration is central to all of the spiritual disciplines. Without it, they become dull and overwhelming to our lives. Foster notes that every discipline should be characterized by carefree gaiety and a sense of thanksgiving. The joy of drawing closer to God in our relationship with him should be cause for celebration and strengthen our resolve in making them a regular part of our spiritual lives. We are encouraged to celebration from the Apostle Paul as well. In his letter to the Philippians, he encourages us to rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Easy enough, except that it is not always easy to rejoice always. There are things that concern us, things that weigh us down, things that hinder living a carefree life in obedience to Jesus. Paul says we are to have no anxiety about anything, or in a different translation, to be careful for nothing. Now that word careful means to be full of care, which is the opposite of a life of joy. The idea of being full of care is drilled into us throughout our whole lives. It is only through prayer and trust in God that we can break free from carrying those worries and leave them in God's hands. Now, Paul also tells us that we can get to this place in our spiritual lives by setting our minds That is, thinking about the things in life that are true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, and gracious. Basically, the things that are of God. When we do this and we thank God for them, we will be filled with his joy. All of this, however, is an act of the will, which is why celebration is to be considered a discipline that will require focus and work on our part to train ourselves to approaching life in this way. So you may ask, what does it benefit me to live in constant joy? Seems more like denial than something good. And Foster identifies several areas of benefit that celebration can bring to our lives. It saves us from taking ourselves too seriously. Celebration brings with it a freedom to laugh at ourselves and enjoy being alive. It can help in combating sadness and depression. It can give us perspective. As mentioned, we can laugh at ourselves, but we can also come to see that the things in our lives that seem so monumental aren't so great as we might once have thought. Freed from this sense of self-importance, we are also freed from a judgmental spirit towards others. Celebration is contagious and multiplies in our lives and in the lives of those around us. Well, how then does one practice this discipline? How do we put this into practice? How do we grab hold of that joy that God has set before us? And to that question, Foster offers several suggestions. It says that one way is through singing, dancing, and shouting, and that's shouting for joy, not anger. As we get older, we forget to indulge in these activities. Jesus delighted in children and calls us to have a faith like a child. And part of that is to remember what it was like to be a child and to laugh and to dance and to sing and to make noise simply out of a joy for life. A second way is through laughter. They say laughter is the best medicine, and they may well be right. We feel better when we laugh. There's something good in that relief, in that release. Laughter eases tension in ourselves and others around us. As adults, we can take ourselves too seriously and miss out on the playful humor that God created in us. So poke fun at yourself. Read funny jokes. Enjoy cheesy puns. Watch a good comedy instead of the news. A third way is to engage your imagination and creativity. And again, we look to the example of children whose imagination takes them far away to wonderful places that are full of laughter and joy. Encourage that imagination and creativity in others as well. Share the joy of their art. Relish the story that they may write. And a fourth way is to make family events into times of celebration and thanksgiving. And don't just wait for a birthday to provide an excuse to celebrate. Pick any moment. A good grade achieved by a child, a raise at work, or an anniversary, or anything. That's an anniversary for anything, not just a wedding. Form your own rituals, such as a regular family game night, where you can let down your guard and celebrate the joy in one another. Now, these are all just examples, and I'm sure that if you sat down for a few moments and gave it some thought, you could come up with any number of ideas that would work best in your circumstance. The point is to actively pursue and engage in celebrating the life that God has given to you and allow Him to fill your life with joy. Well, we have come to the end of the study of spiritual disciplines. And if you missed any of them along the way, you can just go back through the playlist and give a listen to what you missed. There has been a lot of information in these videos. A lot to digest, a lot to go through, a lot of points. And you might want to go back and watch them again as a reminder of what you have learned. Or you might want to pick up a copy of Foster's book for yourself to carefully read through. Whatever you choose to do, please don't choose to do nothing. Let me close off with how Foster concludes things and connects all the disciplines together. He says this at the end of his book. We have seen how meditation heightens our spiritual sensitivity, which, in turn, leads us to prayer. Very soon, we discover that prayer involves fasting as an accompanying means. Informed by these three disciplines, we can effectively move into study, which gives us discernment about ourselves and the world in which we live. Through simplicity, we live with others in integrity. Solitude allows us to be genuinely present to people when we are with them. Through submission, we live with others without manipulation, and through service, we are a blessing to them. Confession frees us from ourselves and releases us to worship. Worship opens the door to guidance. And all the disciplines freely exercised bring forth the doxology of celebration. I pray that your lives will be a celebration of all that God is doing in and through you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on future videos. And thanks for watching with us.